بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Inshallah, today we'll be talking about Surat Ad-Dhaariyaat. And it exists within the cluster of surahs that starts with Qaf and ends with Hadid. And all these surahs, they offer comparisons and choices. And all of the topics that these surahs cover are extremely important and very critical to our existence as Muslims and to the understanding that we have of the world. And Surat Qaf began yesterday, we talked about it, and it offered the biggest comparison that's there between being someone from Ahl al-Jannah or being from Ahl al-Nar wal-'iyadhu billah. And it did it in a very dynamic manner by taking us into the future and then taking us back again and giving us the ability to take a moment and think and make our choices and watch out for oblivions, which is the key problem that the surah talked about. Surah Ad-Dhaariyaat offers a different comparison and a different choice. Surah Ad-Dhaariyaat talks about or compares being functional, being purposeful, having a purpose in life, and not, and living a life that is purposeless or aimless, or living a life where you're not functional, where your goals are not the goals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you to have. We made the wrong choice in terms of why we're here, what we're here to do. And it's a very important surah because it has within it probably one of the most, if not the most important ayah in the Quran for us as human beings, as Muslims, to know what our purpose is. And it's a Mecca surah. It's not very long, but the stories that it has in it and the topics that it tackles, trying to explain it, are very interesting. It starts by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making an oath, or a number of oaths, a series. وَالذَّارِيَاتِ ذَرْوًا فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا فَالْجَارِيَاتِ يُسْرًا فَالْمُقَسِّمَاتِ أَمْرًا إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَصَادِقٌ وَإِنَّ الدِّينَ لَوَاقِعٌ. And what these are, الذَّارِيَاتِ ذَرْوًا فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا, are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing us how things happen in stages. Dhariyat is the wind that carries the seeds from a place that they won't grow to a land that they're able to grow in. فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا, the clouds that carry the water. فَالْجَارِيَاتِ يُسْرًا, these are the ships that will later carry the fruits that the seeds will turn into. فَالْمُقَسِّمَاتِ أَمْرًا, and this is how the fruit will be distributed amongst others. Now, if you go to the tafsir, you'll find that the different scholars have had multiple opinions on what these are. Are these malaika? Are these just natural phenomena? Are they people? They differ. But regardless, what you see here is you see different roles. You see different things occurring one step at a time in order for the final product or the final goal to actually be achieved. And that's basically what the surah is going to focus on and touch on. The fact that we all play a role in achieving the bigger goal, and that we have to identify what that role is in order to do it properly. The other side of the coin is just not caring about all that, not being a part of that bigger picture, not having a role, not having a purpose, and then living life just running after rizq, which is what the surah is going to take a moment and talk about. That's why the answer of these oaths, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking these oaths, I swear by الذَّارِيَاتِ ذَرْوًا الْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا الْجَارِيَةِ إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَصَادِقٌ, what you have been promised is the truth. وَإِنَّ الدِّينَ لَوَاقِعٌ, and the deen, meaning the day of judgment, is going to occur. That's one way to understand the ayah. Another way to understand the ayah is a deen, which is religion. Lawaqi' is reality. And indeed, faith or religion is reality, or will be reality, and I think that's more in keeping with what the oaths were trying to explain, meaning giving that sense of purpose, of goal, of different roles and different people doing different things to achieve a common goal. That's why right after these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, قُتِلَ الْخَرَّاصُونَ الذين هم في غمرة ساهون يسألون أيان يوم الدين يوم هم على النار يفتنون. الخراص is someone who lies aimlessly. الكذب is lying. الخراص is someone who just lies for the sake of lying. I mean, there's no goal for the lie. They're not trying to achieve anything by lying. And then, which is again in keeping with the main concept of the surah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elaborates a little bit and explains. الذين هم في غمرة ساهون, Al-Ghamra is where you're up to here in water. Maghmur, meaning that you're flooded or you're sahun, unaware or distracted. So what the ayah is saying is that may Allah punish those who are kharrasun, those who just lie for the sake of lying, not realizing that they are very close to drowning, but they've been distracted from that. They pay no attention to it. They don't notice how close they are from being in a state of complete loss. And that's what the surah, the ayah is trying to point out for us. سورة الذاريات هي السورة الثانية في هذا المحور الذي يبتدأ بقاف وينتهي بالحديد، وكلها مقارنات واختيارات. الله سبحانه وتعالى يقارن لنا أمورا ويخيرنا بين أمور، وهذه المقارنات والاختيارات في منتهى الأهمية في الدين. يعني كل سورة تتحدث عن مقارنة واختيار يعني تكون أهم من التي تليها. فالبارحة كانت سورة قاف، وخيرتنا بين أن نكون من أهل الجنة ومن أهل النار، وهو الخيار الأعظم والخيار الأكبر، وكل الخيرات من بعد سورة قاف إنما هي تخدم وتصب في نفس القالب. سورة الذاريات تقارن بين أن يكون لك دور، أن يكون لك هدف، أن تكون لك وظيفة، أن تكون لك غاية، وأن لا يكون أن تعيش في في ضلال، في لا معنى، في انعدام جدوى. وهذا التخيير في سورة الذاريات مهم، لأن فيها آية من أهم آيات القرآن إن لم تكن أهم آية يعني في كتاب الله سبحانه وتعالى. فتبتدئ السورة بالقسم الذي يقسم الله سبحانه وتعالى به: والذاريات ذروا فالحاملات وقرا فالجاريات. ما هي هذه الأمور كلها؟ اختلف العلماء اختلافا طويلا، هل هي الملائكة، هل هي الريح، هل هي السفن، لم يتفقوا. ولكن لو نظرنا في الآيات سنجد أن الله سبحانه وتعالى يتحدث عن أدوار، ويتحدث عن يعني متوالية. الذاريات ذروا، الريح تأتي بالبذر في الأرض، فالحاملات وقرا السحاب يحمل المطر، فالجاريات يسرى السفن تحمل الثمر، فالمقسمات أمرا تقسيم الرزق بين الناس. فتشعر أن العملية متوالية، وأن هناك أدوارا مختلفة، وأن هناك من يقوم بهذا الدور بذلك الدور، وكل له دور يقوم به. وهذا هو المعنى الذي سنجده في سورة الذاريات. ولذلك كان جواب القسم: إنما توعدون لصادق وإن الدين لواقع. يا ترى الدين هذا هنا هو يوم القيامة وأنه سيقع، وهذا صحيح، أم أن المعنى ربما يختلف؟ الدين بمعنى تطبيق الشريعة وتطبيق أمر الله سبحانه وتعالى يكون واقعا إذا ما كل منا قام بدوره على الوجه الذي أراد له الله سبحانه وتعالى. من أجل ذلك بعدها مباشرة يقول سبحانه وتعالى: قتل الخراصون. والخراص هو ذلك الذي يكذب دون جدوى، والكذب دون أن يكون هناك هدف من الكذب. الخراص هو الكذاب، لكن الكذاب هو الذي يكذب دون أن يكون هناك ثمة هدف معين من كذبه، يكذب لمجرد الكذب. وهذا يصب في نفس المعنى الذي تخدمه السورة. ثم يصفهم الله سبحانه وتعالى: الذين هم في غمرة ساهون. الغمرة هو المغمور الذي وصل الماء إلى عنقه أو إلى ساهون، ملتهن عن حقيقة أنه في غمرة، أنه قريبا جدا سيغرق ويموت. وهذا حال الإنسان الذي يعيش بلا جدوى وبلا هدف وبلا غاية وبلا دور يخدمه، ساهن عن حقيقة أن الأجل اقترب وأنه مغمور، أنه في غمرة. لكن سبحان الله يسألون أيان يوم الدين، لعبا ولهوا يوم هم على النار يفتنون. The verses right after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says: إن المتقين في جنات وعيون. Indeed, the pious will find themselves in gardens and springs. I'm talking about Jannah. آخذين ما آتاهم ربهم. They take what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offers them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them for us. He takes us a few steps back, showing us what type of people they were. إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك محسنين. Indeed, they were people of excellence. كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. Explaining the two sides of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us to do. قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون. They slept small amounts of the night. وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون. They would ask for forgiveness just before Fajr. The act of worship that is specific between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayer. وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. Within their wealth There is a right for the person who is asking for wealth, for money, and the person who is deprived, or for the needy and the deprived, which is the other types of acts of worship that serve others. There's two types of acts of worship. The acts that don't serve others directly, it's between you and God, and that's what the first قَلِيلًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ مَا يَهْجَعُونَ وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. And then the other types of acts of worship that serve others, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. The people who were purposeful, who knew what they were here to do and did it. That's why you can continue the verses. وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ وَمَا تُوعَدُونَ فَوَرَبِّ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّهُ لَحَقٌّ مِثْلَ مَا أَنَّكُمْ تَنطِقُونَ. Then the verses point us towards where we should be directing our focus to contemplate and reflect. وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ. On the earth you will find signs for those who have certainty. And in yourselves, within your own bodies, within your own souls, within the structure that makes you an entity, أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Do you not see that? And then in the sky, in this cosmos beyond you, is where you find your provision. And this is what you've been promised. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears, or takes an oath by Himself as the Lord of the cosmos and the earth. وَرَبِّ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّهُ لَحَقٌّ. This is the truth. مِثْلَ مَا أَنَّكُمْ تَنطِقُونَ. Just like you speak, just as certain you are of your own speech, be certain of your rizq. Why are they here, these verses? Very simple. The only way we can actually be people of purpose is if we take time to think about what all this is about. What the universe is here for. Where did it come from? Who put it there? Is there a purpose for the universe itself? Is there a creator? Is there a larger plan that exists? Am I a part of it? Should I care? Should I be asking that question? This is what this is the beginning of the path, of the road that allows you to arrive at the point where you figure out that yes, you do have a purpose, and yes, you do have a role to play. And to figure out that role. That's why these verses are pointing towards looking at observing and contemplating the earth, and contemplating oneself. Because without doing that, without asking those big questions, there will not be big answers. These issues are the philosophy of life itself. Everyone has to have a life philosophy. I mean, even if those who say we don't have a life philosophy, they do. They do. Their life philosophy is that they don't have a life philosophy. That's what it is, but it's still there. I mean, you have to have a way to understand the world. That's what makes you human. That's the difference between us and every other mammal running around, and every other animal and living, breathing thing, is that we're forced by the metacognition abilities that we possess to have a life philosophy, to have a perspective and a worldview, and understand how do you put the world together in your mind. And some people answer the question early on and are happy with the simplistic or meaningless answer, which is what the surah is looking at. And some don't. They reflect more and contemplate more, and they wonder, they ask the right questions, and they come to the right answer. Those who don't have aim in life, those who don't understand their role, what is the most important focus that they have? Someone who's not living for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't serve the deen. What's the most important focus that exists? Rizq, wealth, money. That's why Surat Al-Dhaariyaat will talk about it many times. You're not here for money. You're not here to make wealth. You're not here to put it together. You're not here to build wealth. You're not here to provide. Allah provides for you. You're here to serve another purpose. Of course, you're going to need a certain amount of provision. Of course, you're going to work to obtain that. But that's not why you're here. That's not your goal. That's why the surah, وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ وَمَا تُوعَدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed your provision for you. تكمل السورة فيمدح الله سبحانه وتعالى المتقين ويذكر لهم جنات وعيون ثم يتحدث عن ماضيهم عما كانوا عليه من قبل إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك محسنين كان عندهم إحسان كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون. هذه العلاقة بينهم وبين الله. هناك نوعان من العبادة، عبادة أثرها المباشر بينك وبين الله، ليس لها أثر مباشر على الناس. هناك النوع الآخر من العبادة الذي له أثر مباشر على الناس، ينفع الناس. وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. هؤلاء المحسنين عاشوا حياتهم وقد أحسنوا صنعة هاتين العبادتين، فبنوا ما بينهم وبين الله بأنهم لم يناموا من الليل إلا قليلا وهم يصلون ويستغفرون بالأسحار وكان في أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. ثم تنتقل الآيات بعدها إلى قضية تدبرية، فقال وفي الأرض آيات للموقنين وفي أنفسكم أفلا تبصرون. وأتت هاتان الآيتان في هذه السورة في هذا الموضع. الحقيقة الفرق بين الذي يعيش حياته وله هدف واضح وغاية واضحة وصراط وطريق واضح يدرك دوره في هذه الحياة، والذي ليس له شيء من هذه الأمور، هي قضية التدبر الأولى. الإنسان إذا نظر في الأرض ونظر في النفس، نظر في الحياة وتساءل أنا لماذا هنا؟ يعني هل لي هدف؟ هل هناك من خلقني؟ هل هناك من أوجدني؟ هل هناك من أوجد هذه المعمورة؟ هل لهذا الوجود غاية يسعى إليها؟ أم أن القضية يعني محض صدفة منعدمة الجدوى، فيعني أحيا حياتي هكذا يعني حتى تنتهي فهذا السؤال يسأله الإنسان في مراحل مختلفة من عمره. البعض يتساءل في مطلع يعني مراهقته وشبابه، والبعض يعني لا يسأل السؤال نفسه حتى يبلغ 30 أو ربما 40. لكن دون هذا السؤال العميق ليس هناك سؤال يعني جواب عميق. يعني هذه يسمى فلسفة الحياة. هذه الفلسفة كل إنسان يجب أن تكون عنده فلسفة حياة. يعني ما هو مفهومك للوجود؟ كيف تفسر الوجود؟ حتى الذي يقول لك أنا لا ليس الكل لديه، قل أنا ليس عندي تفسير لهذا الوجود، يعني أو ليس عندي فلسفة حياة. فلسفتك للحياة هي أنه ليس عندك فلسفة حياة. الكل يعني بمجرد أنك إنسان فعندك منظور تنظر به إلى الكون وتفهم به الوجود وتفهم به الحياة. مجرد أنك إنسان، هذا الفرق الوحيد ترى، أو أهم فرق أو أول فرق بيننا وبين البهائم وبين الأنعام، وأننا ننظر في هذه المسألة. البعض ينظر في هذه المسألة نظرة عميقة ويستخرج أجوبة عميقة، والبعض ينظر بسطحية ثم ينتهي عن القضية كما قال الذين هم في غمرة ساهون يسألون أيان يوم الدين. متى هذا؟ قضية عندهم سطحية. متى ليس هو السؤال. يعني متى الساعة؟ لا، ما أعددت لها، هذا هو المهم. متى هذه دعها تتجاوز قدرتك وقدرتي. فهذا هو يعني وفي أنفسكم، ولأجل ذلك مباشرة بعد وفي السماء رزقكم وما توعدون. الذي يحيا حياته بلا هدف يحيا حياته يعني يجعل محور حياته رزقه، يبحث عن رزقه، يسعى في رزقه. الذي يريد أن يلتهي عن هذه الأسئلة يلتهي عنها بالرزق وبطلب الرزق وبتجميع المال. فالله سبحانه وتعالى في سورة الذاريات يشير إلى هذا المعنى مرارا، أن الرزق ليس غاية وجودك. الله ما خلقك حتى تجلب الرزق. الله ما خلقك لتكون عبدا للرزق وللمال، وإنما خلقك لغاية أخرى، والرزق مضمون عنده في السماء رزقكم. طبعا ستعمل وستذهب إلى العمل وتأتي لكن هذا ليس سبب وجودك وليس غايته. فورب السماء والأرض إنه لحق مثل ما أنكم تنطقون. The examples right after that in Surat Ad-Dhaariyaat are a couple of stories that come in a row. The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when the two angels came to his house on their way to the people of Lut. The story of Musa alayhi salam with Fir'aun, and then the story of Ad, and the story of Thamud. 4 stories, each one only a few lines. But these stories are important because they remind us of a common denominator amongst them. There's a thread that kind of attaches all of them. See, when the Malaika came to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he offered them food and they said, we don't eat. قالوا لا تخاف. They said, don't be scared. وبشروه بغلام عليم. And they gave him the good news of a knowledgeable child that will come to him. He was old at the time. They gave him the news of a knowledgeable child. فأقبلت امرأته في صرة فصكت وجهها وقالت عجوز عقيم. So his wife, when she heard that she was going to be pregnant at a very old age, she went like that, as a sarrah. فصكت وجهها, she slapped her own face. And she said, عجوز عقيم, an old lady that cannot bear children. عقيم. The word عقيم is interesting in the story. You're going to find it twice now. عقيم is something that is not productive, that can't produce. It can't produce anything. It's there, but it doesn't function, doesn't do its job. That's where the word comes from. So when someone who can't have children, it's aqim, because they're supposed to be able to, but they can't. I mean, it's there, everything is there, the anatomy is there, it's just not doing its job. So when she heard that she was going to have a child, she said, ajuzun aqim. She thought she was aqim. And it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is correcting her. No, you're not aqim. It doesn't apply to you. Even if you can't have children, you're not aqim, not in that sense. Because you're doing your job, you're playing your role, you're doing your part in this bigger story, so you're not aqim. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her a child at the end of her life. It was more just to have her understand that just because you don't have children doesn't mean that you can't do your job. Just because a woman can't bear a child doesn't mean that she's not productive in the ummah, not at all. There are different roles that she can play and will play. And if you look at historically, many women who didn't have children were able to do a lot for the ummah. And the examples are endless. And the wife of Ismail, of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the mother of Ishaq, was a good example of that. She never bore children before Ishaq. And it's as if in her mind she's aqim, but Allah is saying, no, you're not aqim. And here we're going to give you a child so you finally understand it. It's going to be a child of knowledge. Because knowledge is what we build with. Knowledge is one of the main functions that we have as Muslims. But it was learning that lesson. It was that important concept that she was being taught. Because in a moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to speak about Ad. وَفِي عَادٍ إِذْ أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمُ الرِّيحَ الْعَقِيمَ. And Ad, we sent upon them a wind that was aqim. Now wind is never aqim. Whenever wind moves, wind brings, it pollinates, it brings seeds. It just at the beginning of the surah, he said, وَالذَّارِيَاتِ ذَرْوَةً. It brings, فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا. It moves the clouds and brings what? So when is rih aqim? It was aqim in this example. So you can see this this conundrum that we have. She's calling herself aqim because she doesn't have kids, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, you're not. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the wind. That's never aqim, but in this case it was aqim. مَا تَذَرُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ أَتَتْ عَلَيْهِ إِلَّا جَعَلَتْهُ كَالرَّمِيمِ. Everything that this wind hits, it destroys. The concept is the same things can be used to be functional and productive, or can be used for the opposite reason. It could be completely non-functional, non-productive. And that's why when the two malaika talked to Ibrahim alayhi salam about why they're going to people of Lut, it says, لِنُرْسِلَ عَلَيْهِمْ حِجَارَةً مِّن طِينٍ. We're going to throw at them, or send down on the people of Lut, Sadum, rocks that are made from clay. The same rocks that you use to build a house with are going to be used to destroy something. So it really comes down to what we're going to use, what we have. How are you going to use what you got? That's what's going to make it functional, productive, or non-functional, non-productive. And that's the kind of the thread between these surahs. وَفِي ثَمُودَ إِذْ قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَمَتَّعُوا حَتَّى حِينَ ثَمُودَ. They built everything. They literally sculpted the mountains. They built castles in the mountains. You would think this is a very functional group. No. تَمَتَّعُوا حَتَّى حِينَ. Just enjoy your time. فَعَتَوْا عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِمْ فَأَخَذَتْهُمُ الصَّاعِقَةُ وَهُمْ يَنظُرُونَ. And then they were taken very quickly, uselessly, as if they never existed. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to explain. Just because you do a lot doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. And just because you're not doing something that everyone else is doing doesn't mean that you're not playing your role. Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim, just because you can't bear a child doesn't mean that you're not extremely important in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Doesn't mean that you're a very important character in the history of the human race, just because you can't do what everyone else is doing. And Thamud and Fir'aun with Musa, just because you own everything, you're able to build great things, doesn't mean that you're doing your job correctly. Doesn't mean that you're going to be applauded later for what you've done. No. وفي موسى إذ أرسلناه إلى فرعون بسلطان مبين فتولى بحكمه وقال ساحر أو مجنون فأخذناه وجنوده فنبذناهم في اليم وهو مليم. When Musa went and spoke, he had sultan mubin, he had knowledge with him, he had good evidence, but Fir'aun was too arrogant, he turned away. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drowned him. The same drowning that the surah was talking about at the beginning, when it says, فِي غَمْرَةٍ سَاهُونَ. The person who was distracted, never asked the big questions, living a life of just an aimless life. You don't realize that you're drowning. You're drowning. You're distracted from the fact that you're drowning yourself. It's just a matter of time. You're going to wake up too late. And you can see all these little threads that the surah has within them trying to explain the concept. It's about doing what you're here to do, having a goal that is correct, the right one. يتحدث سبحانه وتعالى بعد ذلك يعني عن مجموعة قصص. قصة إبراهيم عليه السلام مع الملكين اللذين جاءا لعقاب قوم لوط، وموسى مع فرعون، وعاد مع هود، وثمود مع صالح. كل قصة يعني بضع آيات، ليست من السور التي فيها يعني سرد طويل القصص، وإنما فقط الله سبحانه وتعالى يحاول يذكرنا بهؤلاء، يذكرنا بما كانوا عليه حتى نرى الرابط بين هذه الأمور. فلما أتى يعني الملكان إلى إبراهيم وقدم لهم الطعام، لم يأكلوا فخاف منهم فقالوا لا تخف ونبشرك بغلام عليم يأتيك من زوجك سارة. هذه سارة لم تحمل، قالت يعني فهي واقفة تسمع، فلما سمعت أنها تحمل بطفل يعني صكت أقبلت في صرة. الصرة هو هذا الصوت الذي النفس الذي يأخذه الإنسان إذا ما فوجئ بشيء، فصكت وجهها وضربت وجهها تعجبا وقالت عجوز عقيم أنا عقيم. لا، يقول الله لها لست عقيم، مجرد أنك لا تلدين لا يعني أنك عقيم. العقم هذا يعني معناه بالشرع الذي لا ينتج، الذي ليس له هدف، لا يفعل شيئا مفيدا. يعني أجري على الذي لا ينجب، لأن الإنسان يعني المفروض الكل ينجب، فالذي لا ينجب سمي عقيما. لكن الله سبحانه وتعالى أراد أن يصحح هذا المعنى في عقلها. أنت لست عقيما فقط لأنك لا تنجبين، أنت تقومين بدور مهم مع إبراهيم، لولاك لما استطاع إبراهيم أن يقوم بأمور كثيرة، ولما يعني المرأة فقط لأنها لا تنجب تكون ليست ذات دور؟ أبدا أبدا. الشريعة الإسلامية والقرآن يرفض مثل هذا الكلام، ومع ذلك أعطاها الله سبحانه وتعالى ابنا في آخر عمرها إكراما لها لتفهم المعنى، يعني لتستوعب القضية. أنت لست عقيم، خذي هذا ولد، إذا موضوع ولد خذي ولد، لكنك لست عقيم. بينما الريح التي أتت على عاد في نفس السورة ريح عقيم، إذ أرسلنا عليهم الريح العقيم ما تذر من شيء أتت عليه إلا جعلته كالرميم. الريح متى تكون عقيم؟ الريح تأتي بالمطر وتأتي يعني بالحبوب وتأتي بالخير، لكن مع عاد تأتي بالعقم وما تقتل كل شيء. إذا نفس الأمر، يعني القضية الواحدة من الممكن أن تكون منتجة وممكن أن تكون عقيما بحسب استخدامنا لها، بحسب هدفها، بحسب غايتها. وبمجرد أنك لا تفعل مثل ما يفعل الآخرون لا يعني أنك غير منتج وأنك عقيم. القضية ليست بكثرة البنيان ولا بكثرة المال. ومن أجل ذلك كانت يعني قصة ثمود الذين نحتوا في الجبال بيوتا فارهة، قاموا بأمور كثيرة. هؤلاء عندهم جنات وعندهم عيون، يظن الواحد إذا نظر إلى ثمود أنهم يعني منتجون، أنهم ذو هدف وغاية. لا يكونون لا ذوي أهداف ولا ذوي غايات، وأهلكهم الله. تمتعوا حتى حين قيل لهم تمتعوا، هذا كله تمتع. الذي لا يقوم بدوره الصحيح مهما كان قام بأدوار أخرى لا معنى له، هذا أمر لا معنى له. تقوم بدورك الصحيح ليس بالدور الذي تريد. وكذلك الأمر مع موسى وفرعون نفس القضية. فرعون يظن لأنه يملك الأرض ولأن الأنهار تجري من تحته وبنى الأهرام إذن هو يعني لا، أبدا أبدا. القضية قضية أن تدرك دورك وتقوم به بما استطعت، وهذا المعنى مهم. The verses right after it. And قوم نوح are mentioned obviously. وقوم نوح من قبل إنهم كانوا قوما فاسقين. All the main prophets were kind of remembered here in the surah briefly, just reminding us that the people that didn't, they may have done a lot of other things, but doesn't mean that they were functional. Doesn't mean that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ وَمِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. We built the cosmos, and they're still expanding. We built the earth and made it accessible for you. And from everything we created two pairs so that you may remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and figure out that this is going somewhere. There's a goal for all this. فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. So run back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not running away from something, you're running towards something. Running towards a better reality. Where when you know what you're here for and what you're supposed to do, you feel better, you live a better life. When it's clear for us what our goals are, we live better, we're happier, we're much more calm and focused because we know what we're here to do. And that's what the ayat are saying. You move a few more verses towards the end. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And bring remembrance, remind people of this, because this will help those who have some belief in them. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. This is the verse that the whole surah has been building up to. And I only created the jinn and the human beings for worship. Not worship in the terms of just rituals. As important as rituals are in our deen, which is what we're here to do tonight. Extremely important, but that's not all that worship is. That's why at the beginning of the surah, Ad-Dhaariyaat وَالْحَامِلَاتِ all of these roles. That's why he talked about Sarah, the lady who didn't have children, that she wasn't aqim, and she was offered a child at the end. It's not just rituals. Actually, there's nowhere in the surah does it focus on that. Specifically, even when talking about the mu'mineen, كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون, after وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم, they use their wealth for khayr. When you continue, the ayah after says, ما أريد منهم من رزق. I don't want rizq from you. وما أريد أن يطعمون. Allah is saying, I don't want you to make money from me and feed me. إن الله هو الرزاق ذو القوة المتين. Allah is the one who's the provider. And He is the one who has strength, and He is the one who is unpenetrable, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we fail to see that, we live a life where it seems like why are you making all this money for? Where are you going with it? Your children will do the same when you go, what are we running after? What is so extremely important that we can't seem to? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of this reminds us, you're here to worship, not for rizq. I'm the provider, I'll provide for you. Do your job. That's why this surah repeats that concept. We're here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every sense of the word, not just the rituals. That's why the surah focuses on that and gives examples of that. You see each of the prophets trying their best to remind their people. And the surah is not filled with just acts of dhikr and Quran. No, it looks at the concept of worship from a very larger perspective, which is what I hope I was able to explain to you today. تختم السورة بقوله سبحانه وتعالى ففروا إلى الله. فرار إلى الله ليس هروبا من واقع وإنما ذهاب إلى واقع أفضل منه. إذا ما عرف الإنسان غايته وعاش حياة كريمة مليئة بالاطمئنان وبالسكينة لأنه عرف لماذا خلقه ربه وأين هو ذاهب في عمره هذا الذي يعيشه. هذا أمر يحتاج إليه الإنسان حتى يسعد في وجوده. ثم يقول وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. الآية المحورية في السورة وأكاد أقول في القرآن ما خلقناكم إلا لتعبدوا. ليس الشعائر فقط وإنما بالمعنى الذي أسست له السورة والذاريات فالحاملات فالجاريات قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. المعنى العام للعبادة، المعنى الشامل للعبادة، خلقنا من أجله ولم نخلق لجلب الرزق. من أجل ذلك قال بعدها ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون إن الله هو الرزاق. وهذا هو المعنى الذي أصلت له السورة. I hope that was beneficial. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.